Take your Bible to the book of Ruth. It's good to see Brother Joe tonight. I haven't seen him in a day or two. We came looking for you. Did you get my note? All right, good. I'm glad folks gave it to you. Fantastic. All right, book of Ruth. Ruth chapter 1, if you will. Ruth chapter 1. We're going to read this whole chapter, so not with this real long, but Ruth chapter 1, beginning in verse 1. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came into the country of Moab and continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. And Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them. And woman was left to her 2 sons and her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law, that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab how that the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. Wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her, and they went on the way to return unto the land of Judah. And Naomi said unto her 2 daughters-in-law, Go, return each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as ye have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant you that ye may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voice and wept. And they said unto her, Surely we will return with thee unto thy people. And Naomi said, Turn again, my daughters, why will you go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Turn again, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have an husband. If I should say I have hope, if I should have an husband also tonight, and should also bear sons, would ye tarry for them till they were grown? Would ye stay for them from having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it grieveth me much for your sakes, that the hand of the Lord is gone out against me. And they lifted up their voice and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave unto her. And she said, Behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people, and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. And Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee, for whither thou goest I will go, and where thou lodgest I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. When she saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, then she left speaking unto her. So they 2 went until they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass, when they were come to Bethlehem, that all the city was moved about them, and they said, Is this Naomi? And she said unto them, Call me not Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me? So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, which returned out of the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of barley harvest. I want to use these verses tonight. I want to speak to you about dealing with the problem of sorrow. Sorrow is a problem that is going to eventually come to everybody. There is going to be that time. I mean, you can guarantee there's going to be sorrow. If you haven't already felt it, you will. And I think sometimes there's varying degrees of sorrow, depending upon, and because what happens and who it happens to. The book of Ruth begins really in sorrow. Here's a man and his wife. They have 2 sons. There's a famine in the land of Israel, and they go down to the land of Moab. Now, that's a mistake, but they made that mistake, all right? They went to the land of Moab, and while they were there, those 2 sons finished growing up. They married wives, but before they even married, Dad died. And then the sons went ahead and got married, lived there about 10 years, and now both the sons died. I mean, this is a tale of sorrow for sure. Sorrow now, if you would, 3 families involved, and so there's a lot of sorrow. The book begins kind of in an alien setting because I think it wants to remind us of something. The sorrow of the world is alien to the plan and the purpose of our God. Amen. We need to remember that. Listen, He planned and produced a world of perfection. Amen. Perfection. That's what He planned. That's what He produced. And put Adam and Eve in a place that was perfect. Now, our problem is we can't really conceive of that because we don't live in a place of perfection. We live here, you know, and I don't mean Texas, okay? I mean we live on this earth, all right? It doesn't matter where you go, there's problems, but that problem, as you well know, is because of sin. And the truth of the matter is, it's sin that produced sorrow in the world. It wasn't long after the sin of Adam and Eve, especially when you begin to tally the time, it wasn't long there was sorrow in their home because one son murdered the other one. Sorrow came on the scene. Now, I want to talk about it. How in the world do we deal with sorrow? How do you deal with sorrow? And I'm going to make a statement that you may think, well, that's kind of crazy. But I've talked to a lot of people. I talked to some folks not too long ago. A lady that daughter died. She said, she died in my arms. She died begging the Lord to heal her, and He didn't do it. And this lady's very bitter. A lot of bitterness in her. How in the world did we deal with sorrow? The truth of the matter is, we conquer sorrow, and if we're going to conquer sorrow, it's strictly a matter of choice. It's a matter of choice. You know, the Lord put us into this world, and He gave us the ability to make choices. We choose. If you want to, you can have something happen and bring sorrow into your life, and you can allow it to devastate you. If you want to, but it doesn't have to. So wait a minute, preacher, you just don't know, wait, if it was this and this and this, how could you not be devastated? I'm going to tell you, it's still a matter of choice. Right. Amen. There's 3 women. There's 3 women in this chapter. There's Orpah. It's hard for me not to call her Oprah, all right? But there's Orpah, okay? There's Orpah, there's Ruth, and there's Naomi. Those 3 women each made a choice. Right. And that choice determined how they dealt with the matter of sorrow. And that choice determined their future. Just like the choices we make determine our future. We made choices today that's going to affect us in the days ahead. We make choices and they affect us. We choose how we deal with this matter of sorrow. For instance, look first of all at Orpah. Orpah made a choice. She made a choice. First of all, they said in verse 10, they said, surely we'll return with thee unto thy people. And Naomi said, turn again, why will you go? And said, I don't have any more sons. I can remember as a kid reading that thinking, what in the world's that got to do with anything? You know, but later on we figured out, and the Israelite and those folks, those Hebrews, if they were married to a son and that son died, then the younger son was responsible to marry that older brother's wife, The older brother's wife, he was responsible to marry her, all right? And I'm glad that's changed, okay? But I'm glad that's not true. And all you ladies said, Lord, me too. I think about the other brother. Yeah, forget that, all right? You wouldn't want any part of it. But that was the way it was done. And so Naomi said to them, look, not a chance. You just might as well go on. And I'm amazed from verse 10. From verse 10, it's, hey, surely we're going to return with you, all right? In verse 14, it's, see you. It didn't take much, right? Didn't take much. She was on her way, all right? She made a decision. She decided, I'll go back to my own people. You know, that's one thing, but to me the saddest thing is she went back to her own gods. She went back to her own gods, all right? And even Naomi said that. Look, your sister-in-law, verse 15, is going back under her people and under her gods. What a sad commentary. You know, the truth is her name's never mentioned again in the Bible. That's it. Never hear from her. Never hear anything else about her. I'm saying to you, the best choice is not always the easiest. I can believe in the case of Orpah. I can believe, almost, but I didn't. I can believe in her case that the easiest thing for her to do was, well, okay, I'll just go back. These are my people. I'm used to this country. And, you know, my mother-in-law here, she's going to a place I don't know anything about. I'll just stay here. That was the easiest choice. But it wasn't the best choice. It wasn't the best choice. Oftentimes in life, you find out the best choice is not the easy. Sometimes, matter of fact, the best choice is the hardest. And she made an easy choice. So there's one person, she dealt with sorrow. She said, I'll go back to my own people, my own gods, and it'll just be done. Then there's Naomi. Naomi decided, you know what, I need to go back. I need to go back to my people. I need to go back to my native soil. I need to go back to my father's God. Okay? Hey, the truth of the matter is she's backslidden in Moab. She should have never been there.
That's right.
They should have never gone there. But we've got this tendency to think the pasture's always greener somewhere else.
That's right.
We've got the idea, hey, the pasture's greener over yonder. It's better. If I was just there, it would be a whole lot better. Pasture's not any greener, all right? You said, wait a minute, though, there was a famine in the land. Yeah? How many times can you remember in the Old Testament, you think about it, where there was a famine in the land and God's people left where they were supposed to be and went somewhere else and got into trouble,
Right.
got into sin,
Yep.
all right? Got into sin. Listen, folks, life in the land of famine with God is better than in the land of plenty without Him.
That's right.
Without Him. So how do you know they were routed? 10 years. 10 years, Orpah and Ruth were married to 2 Hebrew boys.
Right.
But she didn't have another God. Orpah said, I'll go back to my own gods. They hadn't influenced her. They hadn't influenced her for God. I'm telling you, they're backslid.
Amen.
Backslid people. Then there's Ruth. Ruth decided, I'm going to go on.
Amen.
I'm going to go on. The truth of the matter is she had a new faith. She said to Naomi, she said, don't tell me to go back. Said, thy people will be my people, but better yet, thy God will be my God.
Amen.
Thy God. There's some newfound faith. Now, they're all dealing with sorrow.
Oh, yeah.
They're all dealing with sorrow. I look at Orpah and I think somebody, okay, I'll just put it behind me and go, back to my own people. Looks like that's the end of it. Naomi said, well, I'll go back. I know where I should be. But Ruth decides, this is a chance for me to go on. I could stay here. There is nothing maybe for me in that land according to Naomi, but I'm going. I'm going. There was some new faith. Now, I just want to talk to you about sorrow. If you want to, you can have sorrow and you can let it change you,
Amen.
but in a good way.
Right.
I don't think you ought to give in to sorrow. Shouldn't give in to sorrow. You say, preacher, what have you ever had sorrow? Well, I had my dad die.
Amen.
I had grandma and grandpa on both sides of the family die.
Amen.
I've had an aunt and uncle that were almost like mom and dad to me, pass away. I've lost them, all right? I know what it is to go through some sorrow. Know what it is to face some sorrow. I have looked on occasion, I have a tendency to look at the obituary page. Somebody said, well, why do you read it? Well, I would look at it because I want to see if there's any people that I maybe went to school with that died. Somebody that I knew. And sometimes I run across people that I knew and I remembered and even wanted to attend the funeral, but I hadn't heard about it for just circumstances. And so I find that. But I read that. But in reading that paper sometimes, I can remember looking at it years past, and right after Dad died, and I was looking and seeing, I thought, well, how come that guy got to live longer than my dad did? How come that happened? How come he got to survive longer? I've even looked at other preachers.
Yeah.
Now, how come that guy, and not there's anything wrong with that guy, all right, but how come that preacher got to preach longer? How come he got to live longer and than Dad did? Why did that happen that way? You can ask that question. Well, I'll tell you this. The thing is, you don't give in to sorrow.
Right.
You don't give in to sorrow. I'm reading a biography of Abraham Lincoln. And when their son died, their son Willie died, he was in the White House. It devastated his wife. Just devastated. I mean, she couldn't deal with it. And it left her where, she just wouldn't go out for a time. And when it came time to go and have receptions, there's some she would go to, but she couldn't stay through it. Had to leave. Hey, she let sorrow conquer her. She gave into that sorrow. You say, preacher, you've never lost a son? Nope, never have. Ever lost a daughter? Nope, never have. But I will tell you this: when our kids were little, there were times that I did think about, now how would I handle it if they were to die?
Yeah.
How would I handle it? You said you're morbid. No, I want to be honest. I want to consider that thing. How am I going to deal with it? How am I going to deal with it? You can't give in to sorrow. If you give in to sorrow, it will squash you. But you can allow that sorrow to change you if you will channel it down the right path. All right? Put it down the right path. Let it change you. Let it work on it. One thing sorrow does for you, if you lose a loved one, is it does something about heaven. It makes heaven just a lot better place. It makes heaven a lot better place. To know, and you say, man, I know where they are, and they're there, and we can look forward to it. And the older you get, the more people you know there. And I've heard of many people, and I'm sure you've heard people say, I've got to the point in life where I think I know more people in heaven than I do here. Well, it makes heaven sound better. It makes heaven look better. That's a good thing. I'll tell you this, you enduring sorrow will help you to be able to help somebody else that's going through sorrow. You know what it's like. You can sit down with them. You can put your arm around them and say, I truly know how you feel. Now, you be careful about saying something like that. If you've never experienced it, there's no way you can know how somebody feels. Now, you just can't do it. I could not put my arm around you, and if you had lost a son, I preached the funeral of a 4-month-old child, little girl. The folks were members of our church, and their daughter, she just lived, had a brain tumor, and born with it, 4 months old, she died. I could not put my arm around that dad and say, Dad, I know how you feel. I didn't. I know how you feel. But I tell you, for the last 10 years, I've been able to put my arm around people whose dad died and say, I know how you feel.
Amen.
I know what it's like. I know how that feels. Hey, listen, that sorrow, let it help you. Let it help you. You've had friends die. You can go to somebody else that has one die and say, I know how you feel. You'll be able to deal with them. You'll be able to help them. Listen, don't allow it to make you bitter, but instead help it to, if you will, to lead to better rather than bitter. That it'll improve you. And honestly, even when we look at Naomi, when we look at her in the scripture here, she recognized the hand of God. Would you look? Notice how she put it over there in verse 20. She said, the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. In verse 21, she said, the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me. Hey, she saw the hand of God. She realizes the hand of God. Now, folks, listen. There's no sense beating around the bush. God's involved in these things.
Amen.
The truth of the matter is, her husband got out of the will of God. When you get out of the will of God, if you don't come back, you pay a price. You pay a price. Naomi looked at that and she realized that. She looked and saw and she recognized the hand of God in events. And it's okay to do that. Matter of fact, I think we ought to be honest about it. Don't always say, well, I just don't see how that kind of thing happened. Listen, God works His will.
Amen.
God works His will. Now, I'm real careful about telling people the reason that person died is because of this sin.
Oh, yes.
Man, God hadn't given me an open communication for me and said, look, you go tell them people they lost their daughter because of their sin. I'm not going to do that. God's going to have to really open it up and tell me that. But some people do that. I don't do that. But occasionally it can be. I tell you, when God reveals it to that individual, then you have to be honest. And I think Naomi looked at that and said, you know what? It led to some sorrow. It led to some pain. But she didn't rebel. She didn't rebel. You can take the rest of the book of Ruth and look at Naomi and her actions and what she did. She didn't rebel against God. Look with me, if you will, in the book of Job. Job chapter 2. Job was going through some hard times, as you're very familiar with. And in Job chapter 2, we find this statement. This was Job's wife that spoke to him, all right? In Job chapter 2, verse 9, then said his wife unto him, dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. Said, look, man, you've had all these things go wrong. Just go ahead and curse God, and he'll kill you. But verse 10, but he said unto her, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speak. What, shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips. Hey, did he have some sorrow? You bet. You bet. He went through some sorrow. He lost family. He lost fortune. He lost his health. But he didn't blame God. He didn't blame God. You and I, when we deal with sorrow, we have to be sure we don't allow it to affect our faith. The truth is, it ought to be something that'll strengthen our faith. I think by what Naomi said, Naomi was saying here that she said, you know what? We were wrong and God dealt with us. We were wrong and God dealt with us. But I'm back where I belong. I'm back where I belong. Had she wanted to just continue and really rebel against God, she wouldn't come back. But she was there. She was there. When you go through sorrow, don't let it make you bitter. Choose to let it work on you and help you. Make the choice that, hey, I'm going to go through this sorrow, but it's going to help me. It's going to be beneficial to me. It's going to get me down the road and help me along the way in life. Hey, the truth of the matter is, our faith can take our sorrow and take it to a climax, take it somewhere it's never been. Sorrow often brings us an awakening that nothing else can. Sorrow can wake us up. Wake us up. Well, I mean to the realities. We sometimes, when everything is running along real good and there's no problems, we're not careful. We get the idea, I can get along without God. And I just don't need Him. I don't need His help. Now, we're in good shape. Now, we wouldn't say that. But oftentimes people's lives kind of act that way. Everything is just great. We don't really need the Lord, don't need Him. I can survive without Him. But sorrow comes back and awakens us like nothing else can, because it brings us back to reality, especially when it's sorrow over death.
Amen.
It brings us back to reality. There is no more reality than the reality of death. It strikes, it comes, all right? And sometimes those tears we shed help us to see better. Sometimes those tears we shed help us to see farther down the road. The truth of the matter is, what would have happened to Ruth? We never heard of Orpah again. We never heard of her again. We don't know anything happened to her. She took her way, went back to her people, back to her gods. That's it. But when we come to Ruth, Ruth decided, you know what? I'm going to go on. And man, we look ahead and we know the end of the book, all right? We know what happened. We know that she wound up in the lineage of the Lord Jesus Christ. Why? Because she decided to go on. She decided to go on. She decided, you know what? It's not going to destroy my faith. It's going to make my faith better. It's going to help me. Because of what happened to her, she chose the right God. I spoke to the young people in chapel this morning, and I used Acts chapter 9. And I spoke to them about, I said, there's two questions that you need to get settled in life. And the first one is, who art thou, Lord? Who is God? And what do you want me to do? If you get those two questions settled, you've got life going the right direction.
Amen.
You've got a happy life. Ruth, she found out who God was. She had stayed in Moab. They worshiped a false god.
Right.
but she moved on. And her faith was strengthened. She winds up happy. She winds up not just in good shape, but she winds up in better shape. She winds up marrying a fellow that's not just running down, getting away from a famine, but she winds up marrying a guy that's wealthy. Most girls fantasize about that, all right, sometime in life, you know. Like to marry that rich guy. Like to do that. I'll never forget, there was a woman that we knew, and her husband was killed, and I'll never forget one time hearing her say, the first time I married for love, but the next time I'm marrying for money. Never forget her saying that. But it didn't work out that way, all right? That next guy she married, I knew him too, and if he had money, I don't know what he did with it, all right? And we get these crazy ideas, but wait a minute, it happened to Ruth. Why? Because she decided to not let sorrow just ruin her. She decided to move on with it. Naomi decided, you know, the thing to do is get back where I belong. Get back where I belong. You and I, you've seen people that out of the will of God, and death strikes, and boy, they get mad at God.
Yeah.
Get bitter. But boy, you see those people that realize, you know what? I really found out how much I need the Lord. And you see their faith grow. What's the difference? Well, they made a choice. They made a choice. Listen, our choice is going to affect us. If we choose to, we can let sorrow overwhelm us. Or we can do like David. David sorrowed and wept and prayed while his newborn child was there and sick. But when that child died, he cleaned up. He quit mourning. And the folks came to him and they said, you know, what's the deal? He said, well, I can't bring him back, but I can go to him.
Right.
I can go to him.
Yep.
Hey, listen, when you're dealing with sorrow, don't let it destroy you. Let it make you better. Let it strengthen your faith. Let it increase your faith. That problem will come. It will come. The older you get, usually, the more sorrow you run into. The more sorrow you experience. Kids don't experience it, but as they get older, they begin to experience it. Listen, make the right choice when that comes. Choose to bring you closer to God because of sorrow rather than getting pushed away. Get closer to it. Our Heavenly Father, I pray tonight you'd just bless. Help us, Lord. We're going to face a problem of sorrow in life. That day will come and we'll have to deal with it. And Lord, I pray you would help us as we deal with sorrow, that we might see it as an event that could bring us closer to you. Lord, help us to deal with it. Help us to see the sorrow that we go through will enable us to help other people who are also dealing with sorrow. Now, Lord, I pray that you'd just go with us tonight, take us safely home. Lord, bring us back Sunday. Help us to have a great day Sunday in the house of God. In your name I pray. Amen. God bless you. You're dismissed. Ladies.